Okay, so this is Avodah Zarah, Daf 33. I do want to point out a few things before I get into this. This is interesting stuff. But so Daf 31, at the bottom of that video, I put in a comment. The comment is dealing with a lot of related concepts to a seal within a seal. So a seal within a seal, we live this stuff out like halakhically in our life as if it's Peshat. But this stuff is not Peshat. This stuff is way more complicated and tied into so many things than Peshat. We put two locks on our door, like a normal lock and then a bolt lock. There's a whole bunch of concepts like that. But you go read that comment and you'll start to think about things. So the other thing I wanted to point out, so in the last Daf 32, we were talking about Hadriatic wine, or earthenware of Hadriatic earthenware. So Emperor Hadrian, this is interesting, guys, so don't click away. Emperor Hadrian ruled from 117 to 138. So in the first half of the 2nd century. So Christianity, and I've said this so many times before, Christianity seems to be a Roman invention of some sort that was anti-Semitic, obviously. And I've mentioned some of this stuff before. So there's one place in the New Testament where it talks about Jesus turning water into wine, and it's in John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. So if we consider Hadriatic wine, and remember, Hadriatic wine from Daf 32 it's Pasul. We don't drink it. And that was the kind of the idea in John chapter 2, is that, that's the best stuff. Well, it's interesting, but if you want to date this stuff, you can't make this stuff up. So I have this book here. I've made some videos about stuff, but those videos are private now. The complete text of the earliest New Testament manuscripts. I'm not a Christian, guys. I'm not. Okay, there are 3 verses that cover those verses of the story in John, covering the turning water into wine. P66, Papyrus 66, P75, and Unicol 0162. So those manuscripts are dated. P66, middle of the 2nd century. P75, late 2nd century. The Unicol 1062, late 3rd or early 4th century. So all post-dating Hadrian. Post-Hadrian. So there is not a textual piece of evidence that supports the idea of Jesus turning water into wine before Hadriatic wine was a historical fact. Okay. Now we can get into Daf 32. So at the end of 33. At the end of 32, it says, conversely, with regard to a Jew who goes to a festival of idolatry, if he is on his way to the festival, it is permitted to engage in business with him, because perhaps he will retract from his plan and he will not go. So he'll make teshuvah. Upon his return, it is prohibited, since he will cleave to it and go to idol worship once again. So once he's involved in the idol worship, it's expected that he's going to stick with it. Okay, now we're in 33 now. The Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in Braita with regard to a Jew who goes to a festival of idolatry, whether he is on the way or returning from it, it is prohibited to engage in business with him? Gemara answers, the Rav Ashi said, when that Braita is taught, it is in reference to an apostate Jew who will certainly go to the festival and will certainly not change his mind. The sages taught with regard to a Gentile who goes to a fair where goods and idols are bought and sold, whether he is on the way there or returning from it, it is permitted to engage in business with him. With regard to a Jew who goes to a fair, when he is on the way there, it is permitted to engage in business with him, but if he is returning from it, it is prohibited. The Gemara asks, what is different about a Jew that it is prohibited to engage in business with him when he is returning? The Gemara answers that this is in accordance with that which the sages say, he sold objects of idol worship, and therefore money gained from idol worship is in his possession. Since the money in his possession is assumed to have been gained through the objects of idolatry, it is prohibited to engage in business with the Jew. The Gemara challenges, but with regard to a Gentile, also let us say, he sold object of idol worship, and therefore money gained from idol worship is in his possession. Why is it prohibited to do business only with the Jew? The Gemara suggests, rather, with regard to a Gentile, we say, he sold clothing or he sold wine, but not idols. The Gemara questions this. Then with regard to a Jew, also let us say one should say that he sold clothing or he sold wine, but not idols. The Gemara explains, if he had only wine or clothing to sell, he would have sold them here instead of going to the fair. The fact that he exerted himself to travel to a fair of Gentiles indicates that he intended to sell idols. The Mishnah teaches, and with regard to those who are coming from a festival of idolatry, it is permitted to engage with them in business. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says the sages taught this only with regard to a case where those returning are not attached to one another, that is, they are not traveling in groups. But where they are attached to one another, it is prohibited to engage in business with them. As I say, the Gentile intends to return to the festival with his companions. The Mishnah further teaches wineskins and jugs that belong to Gentiles, and that a Jew's wine contained in them. The Mishnah further teaches wineskins and jugs that belong to Gentiles and that have a Jew's wine contained in them are prohibited. The sages taught with regard to wineskins of Gentiles, if they are stripped and free from tar and new, they are permitted, but old and tarred containers are prohibited. Nevertheless, if a Gentile pitched them and lined them and added wine to them to negate the flavor of the tar while a Jew stands over him, one need not be concerned for a prohibition. The Gemara asks, but once we have established that a Gentile places wine in the containers, what of the fact that a Jew stands over him? Why does this affect the halacha? The Gemara explains, Rav Papa said that this is what the Braita is saying. If a Gentile pitched the containers and lined them, and a Jew then placed wine in them, while another Jew stood over him, one need not be concerned that it is prohibited. The Gemara asks, but since a Jew is the one who places wine in them, why do I need another Jew to stand over him? The Gemara answers, it is necessary, as perhaps due to the Jew's preoccupation with pouring the wine, the Gentile will manage to libate the wine, and the Jew will be unaware of it. The Gemara presents an alternative interpretation. Rav Zavid said, actually it should be as you initially said, that the Gentile himself pours the wine. And here, when he pours the wine into the container, he is considered as one who splashes water and clay and does not intend to use it as a libation. Rav Papi said, conclude from the statement of Rav Zavid that with regard to this incident involving a Gentile who casts wine into the salt receptacle of a Jew, the salt is permitted, as the Jew has no intention of using the wine as a libation. So Rav Ashi objects to this. Are the two cases comparable? There, with regard to the pitch container, the flavor of the wine is going to be lost due to the tar. But here, in the case of the salt receptacle, the flavor of the wine is not going to be lost. Therefore, there is no reason to rule that the salt is permitted. Okay, the Gemara relates a relevant incident. So Bar Adi, the Arab, seized certain wineskins from Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, placed wine in them for an extended period of time, and then returned them to him. So Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef came and asked in the study hall what course of action he should take. Rabbi Yirmiyah said to him, this is what Rabbi Ami instructed me to do in terms of practical halacha. One fills the wineskins with water for 3 days, so that the water will absorb the flavor of the wine, and then pours the water out. And Rava says, in addition, one must pour out the water in them every 24-hour period and then refill them. So once this has been performed, the wineskins will be permitted. It was understood from the above incident that this matter, that is, that one may fill the wineskins with water for 3 times to render them permitted, applies only to our wineskins that were taken by Gentiles. But with regard to their own wineskins, it does not apply, as they are permanently prohibited. So when Ravim came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, both ours and theirs can be rendered permitted in this manner. Similarly, Rab Acha, son of Rava, thought to say before Rab Ashi, this matter applies only to wineskins but not to jugs. So Rab Ashi said to him, there is no difference between wineskins and jugs, as both can be rendered permitted in this manner. The Gemara continues to discuss the halacha of various wineskins. The sages taught with regard to wineskins of Gentiles, if they are new and stripped free from tar, they are permitted, but old and tarred containers are prohibited. If a Gentile places wine in them, the Jew should put water in them. Additionally, if a Gentile places wine in them, the Jew may put brine and fish stew in them immediately, and he need not be concerned. A dilemma was raised before the sages. It is permitted to put brine or fish stew in wineskins ab initio, or is the substance permitted only after the fact? The Gemara suggests, Tashema, come and hear a resolution to the dilemma. As Rav Zvid bar Oshaya teaches, with regard to one who purchases jugs from Gentiles, if they are new, he may place wine in them. If they are old, he may place brine and fish stew in them ab initio. The Gemara discusses the effect of fire on prohibited vessels. So Rabbi Yehuda Nisia raised a dilemma before Rabbi Ami. If one returned prohibited containers to the furnace and they whitened due to its heat, what is the halacha? Is the fire assumed to expunge the absorbed wine or not? So Rabbi Ami said to him, if brine burns away the wine, all the more so is it not clear that fire does as well. It was also stated that Rabbi Yochanan says, and some say Rabbi Ashi says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, with regard to jugs belonging to Gentiles, that one return to the furnace. Once their tar has disintegrated, they are permitted. So Rabbi Ashi said, do not say that the jugs must stay in the furnace until the tar falls apart entirely. Rather, even if it only softens, the jug is permitted, despite the fact that the tar did not fall off. The Gemara adds, with regard to a situation in which the tar was removed by dropping ignited splinters of wood, or kinsa, into the jug, Rav Acha and Ravina disagree. One deemed the jug prohibited, and one deemed it permitted. The Gemara adds, and the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of the one who deemed it prohibited. The Gemara discusses the halacha with regard to beer kept in a prohibited vessel. A dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the halacha with regard to putting beer in it? So Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda prohibited this, and Rava permitted it. The Gemara notes that Ravina permitted Rav Chia, son of Rav Yitzchak, to pour beer into such a jug, but he went and poured wine into it instead. And even so, Ravina was not concerned over the matter, and he said to himself, it is merely an incidental occurrence. The fact that Rav Chia mistakenly poured wine into the jug instead of beer is not a reason to prohibit filling it with beer in general. The Gemara discusses different vessels and the halacha that pertain to them. So Rav Yitzchak bar Bisna had certain vessels made of cow dung and had contained wine of Gentiles, which he filled with water and placed in the sun in order to rid them of the forbidden substance they had absorbed. And as a result, they burst. Rabbi Abba then said to him in jest, you have rendered them prohibited to you forever, that is, you have destroyed them completely. You may say that the sages said that one should fill the containers with water, but did anyone say that you should place them in the sun? So Rabbi Yusna says that Rabbi Ami says a natron vessel has no ritual purification. That is, it cannot be rendered suitable for use, ever. The reason is that this material is highly absorbent. So the Gemara asks, what is a natron vessel? Rabbi Yoshi bar Avin says it is a vessel crafted from the excavation of alum powder. The Gemara relates that an individual named Parzak from the house of Vizier, or Rophila, seized certain containers from the Jews of Pumbedita, placed wine of the Gentiles in them, and later returned the containers to them. They went and asked Rav Yehuda for a halakhic ruling on this matter. Rav Yehuda said this vessel is an item that is not brought into storage for preservation. Accordingly, one may simply scrub such vessels in water, and they are permitted. So Rav Avira said, with regard to these dark brown Armenian jugs, since they do not absorb substances well, one need only scrub them in water, and they are permitted. So Rav Papi likewise said, with regard to these earthenware vessels from Be Michse, since they do not absorb substances well, one need only scrub them in water, and they are permitted. The Gemara continues. The halacha with regard to cups, which hold wine only temporarily, is subject to a dispute. So Rav Asi prohibited them, and Rav Ashi permitted them. The Gemara comments, if a Gentile drank from a cup for the first time, that is, it had never been used before, everyone agrees that it is prohibited, as a new cup absorbs a great deal of wine in its first usage. They disagree when it is being used for a second time, that is, the cup has already absorbed a permitted liquid, and therefore its capacity to absorb a Gentile's wine is impaired. And there are those who say, if the cup is used for the first or the second time by a Gentile, everyone agrees that it is prohibited. They disagreed when it is being used for the third time, and the halacha is that a cup used for the first or the second time by a Gentile is rendered prohibited, but with regard to the third time, it is permitted. Rav Zavid said, with regard to these glazed earthenware vessels, white and black ones are permitted. Green ones are prohibited, because they contain alum, which absorbs liquids well. And if any of these vessels have cracks in them, they are all prohibited. So, Mar Amar taught glazed earthenware kunya is permitted. whether it is black or white or green, because the coating impairs the capacity of the container to absorb liquids. The Gemara asks, in what way is this container different from the case of leavened bread on Passover, which is also absorbed? The Gemara explains its question. As they once asked Maremar, with regard to these glazed earthenware vessels, what is the halacha concerning them on Passover? The Gemara interjects, with regard to green earthenware, do not raise the dilemma, as it contains alum and as a result absorbs leaven well, and it is therefore prohibited. Rather, let the dilemma be raised with regard to white and black earthenware. What is the halacha? The Gemara qualifies the question further. Where they have cracks in them, do not raise the dilemma, as they certainly absorb that which was placed in them and are therefore prohibited. Rather, let the dilemma be raised where they are perfectly smooth. What is the halacha in such a case? Maremar said to them, I observe that they sweat. That is entering Daf 34, so I'm going to stop there. Thanks for watching.